Hello and welcome to the Rooted Woman Project. I am your host, Tanisha Baines, where we are gathering together the modern and ancient wisdom being shared by the women who nourish the world. I couldn't be more excited to introduce you today to Holly Burling. She has actually had a very integral role in my own healing journey. So inviting her to participate in this experience has been just such a joy to my heart. She's a spiritual intuitive, a classical acupuncturist. She does feeding your demons sessions, which is what I had the joy of experiencing with her. She's a teacher and a writer. She brings a lifetime of tools rooted in her own healing journey and an extensive study and training in Taoist and Tibetan Buddhist lineages to her practice. All of these things speak so wildly to my heart. I'm so excited to dive into all of these topics with you today, Holly. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I know all of these things. The second we connected, I think we actually connected to do this years ago. And my life was just in a state of chaos that I had these rose-colored glasses on that we could just make it happen in an instant. But here we are a few years later, and I'm so glad that our paths have continued to cross in this time. I would love to just introduce you to my community and give you a chance to share a bit about yourself and your own journey and what kind of brought you here to this moment in time in your life.
Wonderful. So should I start with my journey?
Yeah, please. I'd love to hear it.
As far as the healing journey goes, I mean, it's been a long road for sure. When I was 19 years old, I remembered trauma from my childhood that had been repressed, completely repressed.
Wow.
And I just, many years later, as an older adult, I realized that I was really divinely guided to heal myself at the time. I just knew I had to, there are some really critical things I just had an inner knowing to do. I knew I had to keep the memories alive within myself by talking to people and writing about it, because I just had this inner knowing that if I didn't, keep an awareness of these memories, again, that have been completely repressed, I would possibly repress them again. So I knew I had to, keep the memories alive, and I got, good health. But I was really a lot on my own. I got a big workbook on how to heal from sexual abuse.
Wow.
And started doing it and doing the exercises in my dorm room.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly lonely time because people around me didn't really know. They knew something was like off with me, but they didn't really know what exactly was going on. And it was such, a personal struggle. And I was experiencing, tremendous, post-traumatic stress from these memories. So I also knew that I had to, there are certain people that I consider trusted people that I knew could handle the information. And I knew I had to tell them because I knew that in moving that energy and expressing my experience, that would help to alleviate the shame, which was so enormous. It was for many, many years. And that's very common with this type of abuse. So those were, some of the things I knew I had to do. I started seeing a psychiatrist just by default, not looking for a psychiatrist over a psychologist, but literally my mom and I found someone in the phone book. This was back in the 90s. And she immediately wanted to put me on medication.
Right.
Antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication. And again, I just instinctively knew I can't do that. Every cell in my body said, don't do that. You need to feel these emotions and experiences as awful as they are, because if you don't, they're going to stay in your body. And medication is simply going to suppress some of the intensity, but it's not going to go away.
Right.
So, again, years later, I realized, I truly was divinely guided, because there's no one was telling me these things. It really all came from within me. And I think that, opens up to just what a big part of my healing journey it is to help other people, not just women, but, especially as I work a lot with women, to really trust themselves and to follow that inner guidance.
Yeah.
Because I feel we all have it, but that started my journey, and it, went on for many years. It was a hard road. Like I said, it was lonely. I really was going through these experiences. I even started working with a hypnotherapist. I don't really remember the experiences, and I didn't remember much. But again, I just knew abuse had taken place, and I also knew it was my mind's protective mechanism to not allow me to remember the details.
Right.
You know,
I'm so impressed by this part of your journey. I haven't heard this before. And one of the things that is really standing out to me that you're sharing is I've seen women go through these experiences, and the amount of self-doubt that comes up around, am I making this up? Did this really happen? Or even the shaming that can come from certain people in their family system because of doubt or disbelief that it could have happened. It sounds like you had a very firm and trusting knowing in what was coming through you. And it sounds like through your mom, you even had a lot of really great support. That's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, again, in retrospect, it was remarkable. I even in college, I had women coming to me who had heard of what I was going through, actually to get counsel from me.
Oh, wow.
So I would tell them I'm in the middle of my trauma. I'm extremely traumatized. And they said, but I think you can help me. So I just would say, okay, this is what I'm doing. So that was really, I think that was really like the beginning of my path as a healer. And, I point that out because as healers, for most of us, I think it's because it comes from a need at some point, critical moment in life where we decide we have to really start healing ourselves.
Right.
And that becomes a gift that we can give others, even if we're in it, like I was. It was, I think at the very least, I was relatable to these women, and they didn't have anyone to talk to. So,
right.
And the other key point that I want to just point out, when I was talking before about repressing the memories, I remember realizing, okay, if I'm that powerful, if my mind is that powerful to repress these memories, I also can use that power to heal myself.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's just like, that power could just be redirected from repression of memories, healing. And for, anyone listening who has experienced sexual abuse in childhood, you don't need to remember the memories to heal. And what you pointed out earlier about, some women not trusting themselves, it's kind of like, you just have to, like you have to just go within and just be really honest with yourself and acknowledge, even though I don't have any proof per se. That's why I went to the hypnotherapist in part, because before I confronted this person or had my family confront this person, I felt I needed to have actual evidence.
Wow.
To possibly press charges and at least to confront him. And I couldn't recall enough, substantial memories or quote evidence. So I just had to be just so utterly trusting of myself and my experience. I know this happened, and I could, reflect on earlier times in my teen years where, I was incredibly scared of boys, for example, and a boy kissing me was a scary thought. And, so it all kind of like, I could connect the dots, I knew at the time it wasn't like normal,
right.
I use that, to just kind of build my case for myself that yes, this happened.
Right.
Sometimes there isn't any real proof because
Right.
these stories are so convoluted, but you just, have to go within and just trust yourself, because you we do know a lot more than we give ourselves credit for.
And I think I love what you said too about there's this part of you that just knows, and at the end of the day, whether something comes of it outside of yourself, like pressing charges or having a confrontation, that energy and that belief and that knowing lives in your body. And that alone is worth looking at and healing, no matter what might transpire outside of that.
Exactly.
That in and of itself is very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree.
Wow. That's amazing. So from this experience, you kind of dove into your own healing, and then where did that take you from there?
I mean, it took me to, I lived in Austin, Texas for a while. I was working as a chef. And I got into yoga there. And I, because again, this was a continued, I'd say 2-decade long journey before I really feel like I really cleared it, maybe not fully, but very close to fully. So, I was still having issues and, it wasn't like I'm done with college and I'm healed now. I mean, it was really ongoing, but I got into yoga in Texas and just found that it was such a great way to really move that energy in my body. Because I've been doing talk therapy, which I do think is really helpful, but I know you also have to address the physical body. So yoga really helped open up a lot for me in terms of my my healing. And then my mom was suffering from fibromyalgia. And I moved to New York City. I got offered a job to cook in New York City, and it was a very exciting job with Mario Batali at the time. It was a big deal.
Cool.
Very cool. So right before I left Texas, this woman I knew casually. I think I don't know how it came up, but I told her about my mom and how there's no diagnosis or no treatment rather for fibromyalgia. And she handed me a book about treating fibromyalgia with Chinese medicine. And I had never even had acupuncture before at this point. So this is I'm like 27 at this time. And so, I read the book and it made perfect sense to me, just, talking about energy and chi and how fibromyalgia often has a root in trauma. And that trauma gets, implanted in the body basically and causes a lot of pain. So that opened a seed for, Chinese medicine, or planted a seed rather. And then I moved to New York City, and within a month of being there, was connected with a healer named Rochelle, who was a Filipina woman, and had my first acupuncture session. And it was, I just remember it was it was in the summer. It was like a hot, non-air conditioned apartment on the west side. She was at that point, probably in her early 70s, but she was working on the floor. So I'm just on the floor. Wow. She worked with me for 3 hours.
What?
Doing acupuncture, shiatsu massage. She also practiced Tibetan medicine and macrobiotics. And it was life-changing.
I would imagine. That's amazing.
It just, she asked me so many, just brilliant questions about, my relationship with my family and my diet and just things that, I didn't experience being asked when I went to a Western doctor.
Right.
So it was exciting. And then I continued to see her for the next couple of years while I was, cooking 80 hours a week and just really wearing myself out. And she at one point told me about her teacher, Jeffrey Ewan, who is, he became my teacher, but he's an 88th generation Taoist priest.
Oh my gosh.
From China, with practicing and living in New York City. And Rochelle told me he was the most powerful healer she had ever known. Wow. So I'm thinking, I think Rochelle is the most powerful healer I've ever known. So if she's saying this about Jeffrey, he's got to be
really good.
And
yeah.
So I decided I was going to study acupuncture with him.
Wow.
And yeah, it was interesting. My mom really, I feel like my mom has always been in a subtle way. She's not a kind of really emotive, cheerleader type at all. But when she gives you advice, which isn't that frequent, I always take it very seriously. And she said, I can see you doing this. I can see you becoming acupuncturist. And Rochelle also said, she said one day, she said, you're a healer, Holly, right? And I
Mm.
said, oh, really? And she's like, yeah, you're definitely a healer. So
Mm.
that opened up going to acupuncture school. And I kind of pretended to look at other schools because I thought I should
Mhm.
do some research.
Yeah.
But I knew 1,000% I'm going to go study with Jeffrey. So I studied
Right.
with him, in Manhattan for 3 years and got my master's with him. And have continued that. I graduated in 2008 and I've continued to study with him for all these years.
Wow. So he's still there, still in New York.
Yeah,
That's
he's still
amazing.
in New York. Yeah, he teaches around the world. And he's what I like to call a true humble master.
Wow.
He like to be called a master,
Mhm.
which does a lot. And he's a true blessing. And
Mm.
his Taoist name is it means initiating chaos.
Nice.
He looks like he's about he looks like a teenage boy almost, but he's in his 60s. He's just very, very cultivates his chi, takes great care of himself, and he's very unassuming. But he's quiet but immensely powerful.
Wow.
So, he really helped me. I got to be his patient and take herbs with him, which is a real true blessing and a rare opportunity. And that period in school and the few years after I graduated, that really helped to clear more of the trauma out of my body.
Mhm.
So that was really helpful.
I also am really struck by that point, and I don't know if it's like a personal, it like hits my heart, but there's that point when this woman who you trust and she's working on you and she looks at you and says, you're a healer too. And I feel like there's this moment where someone you really admire and trust sees something in you that you're like, oh my gosh, I am? Like, really? Like, I possess some of the same qualities that you do, and I think you're amazing. Like, I feel like that's one of the special moments when you have someone that can really see you and can actually call it forth in you. And it just like opens the door to say, like, I am that. And here I'm going to go study this, and I'm going to really sink myself into that journey. I feel like it can be such a turning point for a lot of people just to be really fully recognized.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I just really
I feel like people like Rochelle, I call key players. Because I feel like we all have these key players and that really have a major impact on our trajectory.
Yep.
Certainly, and it can be someone you know very briefly or long term, but she was certainly a key player. And yeah, I love what you said. I mean, just seeing it in another person just allows for its expression.
Yeah. I love that you call it key player too. Like, I just get this image of like your timeline or anyone's timeline, right? And here's this person that's just going to pop in and be like, oh, we're going to just direct your attention this way now instead. And it's like something completely different unfolds because you awaken to that part of you that's like, oh my gosh, I never saw myself like that before. Which I know we're going to get to later, but which is one of the things I loved about what we're going to talk about later, the witching hour, where it feels like that's like one of the foundational pieces. It's like really learning to see yourself in this whole new way and tap into a lot of that trust. So I don't want to let it all out, but I love how that kind of like circles back together.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So here you are, steeped in this study and becoming an acupuncturist, and I'm like guessing like you're practicing and now we met through feeding your demons, which I am obsessed with. Like, I love that practice. I love that experience. Both times we've done it together, I had it just helped on such profound levels. Was that all a part of this training as well? Like, can you when did that come into the fold?
Yeah. And I just want to say, I love that you love that practice because I do too. And not, I think I have to talk about it more, I think, to get in general, not here, but just to help people understand it. So it was really cool that you were so open to it, because not everyone gets it or is open to it. So I really appreciated that. But so that goes into the Buddhist lineage. So basically, just a quick story, because I think it's, again, just kind of how things line up.
Yeah.
In 2009, I was working, I was just out of acupuncture school, starting to see patients, but also working as a chef again at a restaurant in Brooklyn, because I just needed to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And one of the cooks that I was his boss, his name was Glenn. We became just, we were kind of like connected by our souls immediately, and we became very close. And he acknowledged to me at some point that he was struggling with heroin addiction. So my girlfriend, who lived in Colorado, she told me, you've got to get this book called Feeding Your Demons. It's this practice by this woman, Lama Tsultrim Leone. And she said, I really think it'll help Glenn with his addiction. So I bought the book for Glenn, and then he ended up kind of quickly taking off and moving to Hawaii to surf. And I was going to mail it to him, but I didn't. And so I had the book in my possession, and I, started reading it, and then kind of skipped to the practice. And it was so powerful. And I actually feel like, so the practice was created, a long form of it was created in the 11th century by a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist yogini named Machi Glogren. And then Lama Tsultrim Leone, who wrote the book, who is said to be the reincarnation of Machi Glogren, which is kind of mind-blowing. She turned this, like, what is really a, probably like an 8-hour ceremonial practice.
Wow.
With the Tibetan drums and, food offerings. And I've
Oh
done
my
the
gosh.
whole
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills. That sounds amazing.
But Lama Tsultrim made it into a non-secular practice and turned it into a very concise, like the one you experienced. So, everyone can do this practice, but its roots are from the 11th century. And so that's the Buddhist lineage I'm part of, who had a woman as the founder of this lineage, which is very, very rare. And then again, to have Lama Tsultrim as the current lineage holder, who is said to be a reincarnation of Machi Glogren. And so after, I got really into the practice, and then I decided, I think I met Lama Tsultrim in 2012. She came to New York City to do a weekend workshop on feeding your demons at the Tibetan.
Wow.
And then in 2015, I made my first journey out to her temple, Tara Mandala in southwestern Colorado, and did the first part of the training to become certified as a practitioner in feeding your demons. So that's, so that's the, I talked about the Taoist lineage, and then this is the Buddhist lineage.
I love, one of the reasons why I love feeding your demons. I have a history in meditation where we would go into these very, very deep, rich spaces. We would look at past lives. We would look at death spaces. We would look at womb spaces. We would look at all of these very beautiful, rich spaces. And this particular practice really reminded me of that. Like, it really kind of took me to some of that same level of depth. And what I love about it is that it humanizes or de-villainizes the demon. In a lot of the women that I work with, there's this part when you're first starting out on your journey where you're like, oh, I don't like this part of myself, or I wish I wasn't this way, or there's this desire to kind of eradicate different qualities of how we see ourselves. And the thing that I've loved about this practice that I've done with you is, like, at the end of it, the demon always morphs into something that holds so much wisdom and insight on our healing journey. And it's not actually this thing we need to eradicate. It's this beautiful thing that we get to just understand more deeply. Like, what is it in search of? And I just think it's such a beautiful practice.
Yeah, you really described it so well. And it's such a powerful practice of integration, like you're saying.
Yes.
It's like these parts, what can be called the shadow or just suppressed or repressed parts that we might not like. When we actually listen to them, then we can really transform them into, you know, by giving them what they need rather than ignoring them. And then that gets integrated into us as, you know, positive, powerful energy and life force.
Right.
So it's a, you know, it really is an alchemical process. I mean, I love the fact that it's just you, same with like what I always felt about yoga too. It's just you and your body, mind, spirit doing profound things. You know, you don't need anything external other than, you know, just guiding yourself or having someone guide you through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is also this other beautiful lesson that you do so beautifully in your work, which is sourcing from within, you know, finding that self-sourced truth, self-sourced safety, self-sourced power, intuition. Like, so I feel like as women in particular, we tend to really kind of gravitate towards these external mechanisms for bolstering ourselves. And at the crux of everything you do, it's just like this constant reminder that we get to go inward, that that's where the real magic lies. So yes, a huge fan of feeding your demons. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so we've got these two pillars. And then I know a little bit about the story of the witching hour, which is another one of your most like phenomenal offerings that I cannot wait to join in on. Let's hear about that one because I'm really excited.
Okay, so the witching hour is for women who are awakening to their intuitive abilities with a calling to deepen their connection to spirit. And it was born from, I mean, basically, it's funny because I feel like I have shared this story so many times, but it's like it needs to be shared, and you're asking me to share it. So of course I'm again, but it's I get really excited talking about it. I grew up with you know, very around psychic women. My mother, she, you know, she's still alive. She's very psychic. Her mother was my mom's younger sister, who is my aunt, Kathy, who's in spirit now. She was wildly psychic. One of my mom's best friends, Doreen, a lifelong family friend who's very psychic. And then Doreen had a cousin named Georgia who was like kind of like queen of the psychics. She was a professional psychic.
Wow.
She worked with the, you know, police and FBI. Her forte was locating serial killers.
Oh my gosh. Do you know that I'm obsessed with serial killers?
I saw that. I just got I saw that on Instagram, I think yesterday or, you know, 2 days ago.
Gosh.
Yeah, so it's funny. I didn't even remember that when I just said that. Yeah, so we'll have to talk more off camera.
I'm obsessed. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I grew up around these women, and I mean, Georgia I met as an adult when I was an adult, but the other women I grew up with, and I just remember being a child, and you know, after a holiday meal, the men would go, you know, to the living room, to the TV, and the women on my mom's side would stay around, you know, clear the dishes and then stay at the dining room table or the kitchen table. And I would just always hear bits and pieces of them talking about, you know, a dream. It was very casual. It wasn't like this formal thing at all. But talking about a dream they had, or, you know, this deceased relative came in a dream and told me this. Or hearing about, you know, how haunted my mom and Kathy's and their mother's house was growing up. So always hearing those stories, you know, hearing about spirit activity. So it was just ingrained in me. It was natural. And I'm sure that really helped to instill, you know, my ability to trust my perception, and just that knowing that there is so much beyond us that we don't see or perceive, but it doesn't make it any less real.
Right.
And one of the, you know, most powerful stories my mother shared with me about trusting myself or trusting oneself. You know, I just heard these stories, you know, I think maybe a lot of families are like this, but these stories just get repeated, and then they actually get really woven into the listeners, you know, basically selves. You know, they really become your story too through the retelling of them.
Right.
And my mom told this one story. She was, I think she was just about to graduate from pharmacy school in upstate New York, and she she was working in a pharmacy, like the night shift, until 9 or 10 p.m. This must have been in the 60s. And she was driving home one night and heading, to turn on the, back country road that she would take to her parents' house, which was in the country. And a voice inside her head, and she said, it wasn't like her voice. It was like something still coming through, her mind, said, don't go down the back road. And so she kind of like, I get chills still to this day.
I'm getting chills.
And she, she was kind of, I think, a little shaken, but like, okay. And she kept driving, and then heard it a second time, much stronger, and just this clear cutting, do not go down the back road. And so she listened. And her point of the story was she'll never know what would or wouldn't have happened. But the point of the story is you always have to listen to that inner voice. You cannot deny it or ignore it. And I think that was just so powerful, hearing that as a child and teens, just, here and there it was retold, because that's the whole premise really of the witching hour, is just really listening to your inner voice. You can't always prove an intuitive feeling. Or inner knowing. And sometimes you can, sometimes you're like, I'm going to see this person getting coffee after this interview, and there they are, and you're like, oh, yeah, I guess I am psychic.
Right.
But at the time you don't get proof or validation, but you still have to stay in that self-trust. And, who knows, maybe that voice saved my mother's life. Maybe it's unlikely it was nothing, because it came out of nowhere and it was so clear and powerful.
Right. And I feel like too, was your mother already kind of in tune with this part of herself, or was this kind of her first experience with it?
I mean, I think just that's a great question. I think from growing up, hearing stories from her mother about her mother's own psychic things happening, and all ghosts, like, again, it was a lot of it's scary, negative ghost activity in the house, she grew up in. But I think she was in tune with it, was aware of it. But even my mother, who is like what I would say wildly psychic, I can still see to this day how she can shut it down sometimes and say, oh, that happened, but oh, maybe it wasn't something. So giving me this powerful story and being like, she could be a professional psychic if she wanted to. She still has that, little bit of hesitation. And, my Aunt Kathy, I considered her my second mother and my soulmate. And she died in 2015, but Kathy was like me, where she didn't deny it at all or question it. And like my mom, even to this day, I know when she was growing up, certainly if she saw something or saw a figure standing, in the room, understandably scary, she would literally pull the blanket over her head. And, so just to show you, even someone who, is an elder and who has had all this experience and validation, she still can question it a little bit. So I think that's such a big reason I created the witching hour. And so basically I grew up with this family, that I described. And then I wanted to say around 2008, I think right around the end of acupuncture school, my sister just kind of in passing shared something about our great maternal grandmother, Sadie. I had never really heard of Sadie. And so I got very curious. And I told Kathy, let's get on the road. Let's take a road trip up to Rochester, where my parents are, to do a psychic exploration. And so we drove up to Rochester. I believe it was like Halloween weekend.
Of course.
Yeah. And both Kathy and my mom's parents both died on Halloween.
Oh,
like
wow.
7 years apart, so there's always been kind of weird witchy stuff in my family. But Kathy and I went up there, and Doreen came over, and my mom, and this is important to share, and it's powerful. My mom got out, she had bought a deck of tarot cards like 20 years before, but just I think was a little hesitant to pull them out and use them, and didn't want to be judged by anyone in the family. Not that they necessarily even would have, but again, I share this because a lot of women feel this way. So my mom, it felt like a very powerful move for her. She pulled out those cards out of the dining room buffet,
Mhm.
and the four of us sat around the table and reading tarot and just sharing our insights. And
Wow.
tell you, when the four of us together, it was so powerful. It was truly electric. And when one of us gave like a very clear, like psychic truth, the chandelier above us would like dim and turn back on. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh.
it was like wild. So
Yeah.
it was amazing. And I just saw like the power of coming together. And so, I did that a few more times with Kathy and Mom and Doreen before Kathy died.
Mm.
And I just knew the witching hour was launched in 2017. I just knew, I've got to bring this to women.
Yeah.
I've got to bring this dining room table, like literally and metaphorically, to other women, because I was so blessed to have this space.
Yeah.
And I think it's really needed by women.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree for so many reasons. And one of the things kind of ties back to Rochelle speaking that truth about you is that the thing about the witching hour and bringing this to women is that I feel like so easy for us to say, oh, that's not me. I couldn't do that. I didn't grow up like that. I don't have that ability to connect to spirit like that. And, I've been doing something in my own way for years. And then recently a friend was like, oh, you want to, like, I'm putting a channeling circle together, and spirit was very clear that I should ask you to join. And immediately I was like, I don't channel. How can I do this? Like, there's going to be all these amazing women in there who channel like messages. And I was like, that's not me. Right. But then I get in there and I'm like, oh, this is totally me. Like, oh yeah, I'm totally doing this. Right. But there's that initial hurdle of like, and this is maybe my own stuff, but I'm going to share it because I feel like other people can relate to this. Like, there's a particular identity of being psychic that I feel has been expressed in media and movies over the years, that there's a really specific way spirit speaks through people. And it's, like the movie Ghost, where like maybe you see somebody or they're talking to you, like you like literally like you're having a conversation. And maybe for some people that is what happens, but there's a wide range of ways that spirit can speak to us. And I feel like that's not necessarily communicated in a way that allows women to really self-identify with it. And so that was something I really liked about the witching hour and some of the things that you'd written about it in opening that conversation.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I feel like a lot of women who come to the witching hour, say that, or a lot of them are very excited, but some are a little hesitant. Like, I don't know if I really belong here. And what Georgia, the psychic, said to me years ago is, and I completely agree, we all have ESP, we all have extrasensory perception. it's literally hardwired in our DNA. So then having, we all have it. And I think part of, what's important about the witching hour or just women exploring their intuitive abilities is to let go of like, a stereotype, like, I need to have a crystal ball and be able to accurately tell the future to be psychic. There's so many different ways of experiencing and receiving information.
Right.
People feel it very much in their body, as, even physical symptoms in their body can tell them something's off, or can relate to someone's physical symptom if they're working as a medical intuitive. I see mainly through my mind's eye. So I see, that's how I, see a lot of, even if it's something like external in the room, I still often will see it through what I call my mind's eye. It's rare for me to actually see something external. But that's not something common for me. Some people hear, like my mom hearing, don't go down the back road. Some people hear things. It's just about really really starting to pay attention to and listen to how spirit speaks to you. And, start to decipher what it means too, because sometimes you might keep getting a message, but you're not sure, like, what does it mean? And I would just say to that, just get quiet. Just get quiet and ask. Go in to yourself and ask, and just like see what, just comes up for your first response before you get into your intellect,
Right.
really go with your first response. And
Mhm.
and you get more as you start to learn to decipher your own sign, the signs and symbols you're receiving, then you get more confident. And I think, intuition and that inner knowing is something, everyone can benefit from. You don't have to be a healer or a professional psychic. I mean, it can really guide your life in very powerful and magical ways.
Right. Yeah, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular hurdle of like, well, what if I'm making it up? Right. I mean, I feel like you touched on that a little bit with your mom's story, but I feel like when people are first starting out and starting to feel different sensations or, see different images in their minds or even hearing different things, it's like, oh, well, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just, there's this way of kind of rationalizing it away. So
Yeah.
as people are, starting on this journey, is it kind of like what you said with your mom, like just listen to it in these small ways and explore it and be in relationship with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think it's important you have like looking at your intention behind it. If you want to just kind of looking at it with like a playful, curious mindset rather than this like very self-critical, like I've got to get it right,
Right.
like a grasping way, like,
Right.
So I think just setting that intention to, really keep an open mind and play with it and be
Mm-hmm.
curious about it. Have people you can talk to about it that you
Mm-hmm.
can, because like you said with Rochelle's reflection to me about being a healer, it's like, if you're in a group of women and you share an insight that you might not have totally believed, but they're like, oh my God, that's 100% accurate. That also helps to reflect back to you that you're, aligned with what you're receiving, or it's accurate.
Yeah.
I think the biggest question I get is it's aligned with what you're saying, but how do I trust myself? How do I trust my intuition? And it's for a while it was hard for me to answer because I haven't had that issue. Believe me, I have lots of other issues. That wasn't an issue for me. And I always feel like the answer I was giving isn't like a fun answer, but I'll share it. I mean, what it comes down to is you have to do your inner work.
Yeah.
You have to do your inner work. If you are an anxious person, then the lens through which you see and experience the world, including intuitive or psychic information, is going to go through that lens.
Yeah.
If you're, if you're a fearful person, same thing. So I think really just being honest with yourself about like what your patterns are and working to really, if this is something you really want to cultivate, then really becoming, to the best of your ability, a clear vessel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where, through diet, like alcohol certainly is going to cloud your intuitive capacities, and also it all, can definitely invite in lower vibration, negative energies or attachments. But keeping really clear, doing like a daily, eating a clean diet to the best of your ability. And again, really like working on yourself. If you're someone who you have to get quiet and look at your mind, because you might say, I'm not really sure like what my inner dialogue is or really how I'm feeling. So just sitting quietly, even for 10 minutes every morning, and, in lotus posture if you can, or like a modified one. I like to do an open eye gaze, like a gentle like gaze outward and down a little bit. And then you start seeing what's going through your mind right now. Are you replaying a story of a conflict you had? Are you severely anxious for the day to come? And then you get clear about that, and then you start working on, transforming or releasing some of these, I could say, impediments to your clarity of vision.
Right.
And feeding demons is amazing, as you could imagine, for like to do a feeding your demons process around self-doubt, around my intuition would be very, very powerful. Doing acupuncture, working with essential oils. There's so many ways to heal ourselves and clear, energetic blockages, obstacles, etc.
Yeah.
So, does that make sense?
It completely makes sense. And I love that you brought that in, because I completely agree that whatever is kind of happening in the internal layers is going to cloud your perception, right? It's like we see the world through our own lens. And so when we can like clean off that lens and kind of heal some of those things become so much more clear. And then we can anchor more deeply in our own confidence. And I am someone who struggles with that particular piece. And so the one thing I would add to it, which I think is probably so well received in the witching hour, is that quality of vulnerability. Like there's a lot there for me in my journey. There was a lot of fear of saying what I felt or what I saw, because I just always assumed that whoever I was telling it to had more insight than I did, and they would be able to say, oh, that's not really happening. Or, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's not seeing it the right way. Right. And so that's what I bring to it. And so that I can see, for me, one of my biggest lessons is in being vulnerable enough to share what I see and feel. And then, like you said, being in a community of people who can honor and validate my experience just for that, just for being my experience.
Yeah, that's a really valid point you brought up. And I know a lot of women feel that same way too. And that's when we start this circle at, for a witching hour gathering, I always tell the women in advance and at the start of the circle, we're all on the same level here.
Yeah.
No one is above or below anyone.
Yeah.
And just setting, and for some reason, I'm getting chills thinking about that, but just setting that intention. That's why it's just important, to have relationships where our intuitive abilities, or we could even say our connection to spirit, our belief in magic and magical things happening is, honored, validated, cherished, and celebrated. I think it's really critical.
Yeah, I agree. There's also, so some of the things that you talked about that I would love to dive into a little bit more was, well, I guess so many things, actually. I take notes sometimes. So if I look down and I'm like doodling, that's what I'm doing as you're speaking. Just on that piece, one of the things that you talked about in the witching hour that you shared with me was practicing skills like reading tarot for each other, reading photos, something I had never heard of, psychometry.
It's holding an object.
I love that.
Someone can bring an object of, just someone significant in their life, or often someone who has passed, and then you hold it and feel into the energy that the object has, that have been transferred by the person who owned it.
I love that. My hands are buzzing as you're saying that. I love that.
And I gotta say, like these women, one time we read a photo, had the women read a photo. So, just looking at a photo and write down, write down what you pick up on. Again, no self-censoring, just go what comes first. And, these women in the group, it was like 12 women, no one had ever done it before. And I'm getting chills. I gotta say, they all said almost exactly the same thing about this person. So it's kind of like, with the right environment and support and kind of like, acceptance of your vulnerability and like honoring your vulnerability, it really brings out that magic in them. I mean, I think I was even astounded, like I couldn't believe, and they all nailed it. I like to give photos to read that are, obviously like interesting. So the man they were reading, there's some very interesting stuff going on with them, and they all picked up on it. So it's amazing.
So was this a photo of someone that you knew, so that like you could kind of validate a little bit of what they were sharing, or just it was a photo that you also had tuned into and they happened to be picking up on the same thing?
It was someone I had known, but like decades before. So I knew him when I was a teen, and I just happened upon this photo of him as like, a current adult. And I got some, very strong impressions from the photo. So I can't say for sure what I picked up on was accurate, but I feel quite certain it was, and the women all picked up on the same thing that I had picked up on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. What you're sharing is having like a very tangible effect on my body. I'm like, when can I come to New York and be a part of this? Like,
I still want to do a witching hour retreat. So that would
yes.
be something we'll have to talk more about.
Oh my gosh. I want to be your first sign up. Yes. I mean, that would just be the thing I love about it too. And this is so the other thing I was curious about that you were bringing up that you just hinted at was kind of like the lower frequency, lower vibration energies.
Mhm.
And that was something that, I have a dear friend who's an animal intuitive. So she speaks to animals and supports animal owners and communicating with their animals. And she actually teaches it. And people always are like, what? You can teach this? But it's along the same line of what you're speaking to. Like everyone has the ability to be intuitive. It just might not be something that was really cultivated throughout your life. And so it's there. You just have to practice. And I was sharing this experience with somebody else who's more within the traditional religious spaces. And she was like, oh, I would not talk to somebody like that because that just feels like very dark energy. She used a different way of describing it. So I've always been taught to really set the intention when connecting to spirit that I'm connecting to spaces of light, beings of love, who are here for my highest good. Like, is that a practice that you do or that you suggest, or like how do you kind of differentiate for yourself between those spaces?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I definitely, for the witching hour and for every, healing session I do when I do, before an acupuncture treatment, I call in all higher beings of light who hold our highest interest. I set a very, very clear boundary.
Yeah.
And I can say I really don't feel, I've never felt or had any of the women share picking up a negative energy at any of the, many dozens of witching hour gatherings I've done over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that really clear intention.
Yeah.
I mean, that being said, there obviously are there's different frequencies of energy in the spirit realm, just as there are, with embodied humans.
Right.
My Taoist priest teacher, Jeffrey Ewan, this is very Taoist, but because I actually, had a poltergeist in an apartment in Brooklyn.
Uh-huh.
So, that's a whole other story. Maybe I'll share it with you sometime, but it was a full-on poltergeist.
Yeah.
I mean, this energy was actually churning on the stove in the kitchen. So gas was pouring out, but the burners weren't lit.
Oh
I mean,
gosh.
it was a very challenging time, and I went to Jeffrey and asked if he knew of an exorcist, knowing I'm sure he, as a Taoist priest, could have done an exorcism. And he basically said, my recommendation is you learn to be at peace with that energy.
Really?
He said that energy was there before you.
Interesting.
So who are you to ask it to leave? I mean, that's very, very Taoist, very non-judgment. And so I played around with that, and I did I would say, there's different terms we use in acupuncture with the points, like releasing, transforming, harmonizing, rectifying.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I harmonized the energy with my own. But it took a lot of cultivation to do that. I mean, because this was a very unpleasant energy.
Wow.
But that's just one take on it. But I had to do a lot of work on boundaries, and that's something also women need help with when they come to me, having already been opened up like to the spirit world or wanting to open up more.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very long conversation, but just in a nutshell, I mean, setting that clear intention, like you and I both do, is important. And again, keeping yourself as clean, your energy as clean and clear as possible.
Right.
Like you don't do intuitive readings. I knew this woman in New York City who gave my friend an intuitive reading at a bar while she had had a few cocktails.
Oh.
And when I saw him afterwards, there had definitely been a transfer, what I in this case would call an entity.
Yes, I'm familiar with that term. Yeah.
Opened up you know, she was psychically very open, but I personally wouldn't want to work with her to receive a reading because
Right.
to me that's kind of reckless. I know this is a judgment, but just like you want to keep yourself grounded and do your own, again, your emotional practices, your emotional healing, and your spiritual practices to keep yourself as clear as possible.
Right.
And that being said, though, some people who are just very, very intuitive are going to have a lot more energies to contend with. And that was me for a very long time. I was having, you know, unwanted visitations. My thing, I would have murder victims come to me in dreams.
Wow.
And I could actually get his full name and I could like Google them the next morning. And in fact, like that was, you know, so that was really hard for me. And it took me a long time to really cultivate my boundaries. Where I wouldn't have that stuff come in because you know, a lot of it was very scary and dark.
Wow.
But
Wow. So, yeah. See, my husband gets a little nervous with me because I love that kind of stuff. And I want to like, you know, I want to be protective of me, myself and my family. But I'm like, there's this part of me that I'm not going to lie is like, I want to meet these people like, like in a helpful, respectful boundary way. But like that, it's just so fascinating.
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And I mean, maybe
In that macabre kind of way.
yeah, I mean, and it's I actually looked into becoming a PI and working. I worked on one, I'll tell you later, but I worked on one case with the Colorado police with a serial killer.
Okay, we have got to talk. Everybody watching is going to be like, tell us too. So we have to do like another one.
And I, you know, I really thought about taking that route because I felt like if I can use this gift to help people and help people locate people who have been murdered and haven't been located yet. But I felt like it was, I saw what happened to Georgia. Georgia was very, very sick because of her psychic work. And that's what will happen if you don't, you know, she just naturally, again, there's, you know, I do believe we're all intuitive as human beings, but of course there's degrees of that, you know, just like people are excellent at sports or math or playing the piano. So Georgia just was really wildly psychic and open and accurate and saw stuff, but it made her very unwell because she didn't the boundaries and didn't really know how to, you know, she was an old school psychic. No one was talking to her about self-cultivation and boundaries.
Right.
Oh so
gosh.
It's all fascinating, but I think just, simply put, just, you don't want to be reckless, you know, calling stuff, and I'm not saying you, but just in general, just it's kind of like common sense too. If you're going to do intuitive work, like make sure you're well rested, well hydrated, well fed, like you go, you know, back in the day, like when I was picking up more energies in the acupuncture office, it hasn't happened in a long time, but if I was like, you know, hypoglycemic, then I'm just a gateway. My boundaries are down and I, you know, I might pick something up if I have a patient with a CT, which happens. It's a real thing.
Yeah, that was one of the fundamental teachings in the meditation school that I went to was even just looking at those types of entities. They specifically called it that, and looking at how they might be interacting with your body and all of, you know, a bigger conversation on that piece. But yeah. So just in consciousness of time, again, like these conversations, I'm loving, they can just go on forever. I just wanted to make sure that we were touching on, there was one other thing I was curious about, and then I wanted to hear more about, just give you an opportunity to really share the breadth of what you bring to your clients, because you touched a little bit on essential oils. I know you have a line that you offer. But one of the things that I was curious about from the witching hour that you said, you called it the divine unfolding. And I was just curious about like that term and what you see that as being.
Yeah, for me, it's really about being in alignment with your own spirit. And I would say, just talking about my work, that's the essence of my work. in Chinese medicine, we say that the spirit is housed in the heart.
Mm.
So being in alignment with your heart, your spirit, automatically puts you in alignment with great spirit.
Mhm.
So that's how, that's really how simple it can be. And so for me, the divine unfolding, I define it as the magical and synchronistic flow one enters when they live from their heart and follow the cues of the universe.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so it's just like you're just like you're in the flow.
Yeah.
You're in yourself, your senses are wide open. You're perceiving, magical things around you, which are happening all the time. And
Mhm.
you're kind of like following like the breadcrumbs from the universe because you're so kind of, you're awake, you're enlivened, and you're in the flow. And that's, it's a space that when I've entered it, it's like it truly is magical. Like things just unfold, like you're kind of part of the unfolding rather than, this happened to me and oh, I missed out on this because I wasn't quite where I wanted to be at, and I missed
Mhm.
something. It's like, no, you're just in the flow.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that like, negative things, might not happen within that flow, but you're just kind of like, even in the hard times when you're in that flow and connected to your spirit,
Yeah.
and again, great spirit, then even the hard times you can still experience beauty and magic and awe, wonderment, and
Yep.
even joy, even going through very difficult times.
Right. Right. I love that you said that because I think that can be really challenging sometimes for some people to say like, oh, I'm connected, I'm in the flow, but why does all this awful stuff keep happening? That in and of itself is a relationship to kind of look at. But I know from my own experience, and this is what I thought was like a really interesting epiphany for myself was, I tuned in, I did meditation practices with myself and with a partner, went into a connected space and felt really clearly that I was meant to take a specific action in my life, that like this particular thing was the next right step for me. And that next right step ended up being one of the most leading to one of the most challenging experiences of my life. And it was really, really hard. But now on the other side of it, even though in the midst of it, I was like, oh, WTF, like, holy cow, like on my knees, begging spirit to like do anything to take me out of the situation. I can look back, having moved through it now, and saying like, I'm a different person because of that experience. I'm in a completely different place in my life because of that experience. And being able to say like, I don't think my intuition at the beginning led me astray at all. I think it knew the journey I was meant to take. And so I love that you bring that in, like, because you're in the flow, things might still happen around you and in your life that we don't deem positive. But when we can kind of rise above and see it as a bigger picture and a journey, then maybe there's still ways to find those snippets of joy and things like you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To add to that, giving oneself like time and space to see the bigger picture or the lesson. Because I find like in our culture, in the healing culture, these days, a lot of people want, I've got to find the lesson in this, or, I've got to make something positive out of this really bad experience as well. And I just think that can be harmful, so just give yourself like the time and grace to experience whatever it is you're experiencing and just trust there is a bigger picture. I think even just having the trust kind of holds the experience.
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Even like what was the point of this?
Because part of, I feel like the human experience is holding intense emotions. It's holding intense experiences, and we can't really bypass that, right? It's about, I feel like we could go on so many beautiful tangents with this. Like holding the intensity. Being a human can be really hard sometimes. Okay, so why don't you bring us home with this beautiful circle your life has created, where you're now serving clients in person, doing acupuncture, You do your feed the demons, which I know I've gotten the chance to experience over the phone, so that's accessible to anybody. I'm guessing the witching hour is an in-person offering, or do you do that virtually as well?
I have done it virtually before, and I want to start offering it virtually again. It's really fun in person, but virtual is good too. So
Yeah.
that's can be done either way, or I hold it in ways.
I'm going to put in a vote for virtual because I live on the opposite coast. So I'll be a sign up for the virtual and a sign up for the retreat. And then you've also recently started a line of essential oils.
Yes, and one other remote offer I do is intuitive guidance sessions. I just want to bring that up because it ties into the and women who want, who just want an intuitive reading.
Yeah.
Have questions about, developing their intuition, can do a remote session that way.
Perfect.
And the essential oils, it's a line called Taoist Rituals of Scent. And their formulas created from Taoist teachings to inspire healing and expand spiritual cultivation. So, spiritual cultivation is it's a Taoist term. It comes through my teacher. But it's what we've talked about throughout this session, just, taking care of yourself, getting your heart aligned, or aligning yourself with your heart, your spirit, removing obstacles, blockages. There's one blend called Awakened Heart that you spray in your chest center, and it really, it just really opens the heart. It clears anxiety, and it helps to release heart pains, which are experiences that have, we've had over our lives, according to Taoist teachings, that cause us suffering and can, kind of stay in our heart energy and keep repeating into new experiences and relationships until we're able to really transcend, understand, learn the lesson, and transcend that particular heart pain. So this blend works on that level. I think it's a really great blend to start with. I mean, I use it every day, multiple times.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
Spiritual practices. Anytime you're feeling anxiety, insomnia, it helps treat insomnia.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
I've got my tally list going. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this magic with us. I feel so inspired and so connected to the work that you're bringing. And my only wish is that we lived closer so I could experience it more firsthand in real touch. But I look forward because I know that's going to happen someday.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I just, again, want to say thank you for being here and thank you for the work that you bring. And thank you for being the steward of helping people and women learn how to trust themselves again. I think that can be such a challenge, and it's such a gift to have someone like you be the steward of spaces that help bring that to people. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. It was such a pleasure to connect with you, and thank you for all that you do. And this was beautiful. We'll have to do part 2.
I know we do. We will schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. I am going to be adding all of Holly's information to the notes below the video. You'll be able to access her website where you can book various sessions with her and purchase her oils. And just be a part of her world, which I highly, highly recommend. We'll also include your Instagram, any other social handles that you want to share with everyone. And until then, we will circle back around with you all in the next episode. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. This was beautiful.